On the 18th of February this year, 2023, Steve Fletcher and I went kayaking from Southwood Bridge to Judbury Bridge. The Huon River at the time was reading 55 centimetres at Judbury Bridge, which is really low. And having never done this before, I thought I'd give it a try while it was fairly safe and quite docile to go down. On the way down, we struck pretty challenging rapids for us in the kayaks that we were in, lots of protruding rocks and powerful water flowing over them, and Steve led all the way down. He's a bit lighter than me, so I thought that it would be best if he'd led rather than me getting stuck somewhere and him having to float past me and potentially crash into me. So we did the trip together. It took nearly 4 hours. It was 16 kilometres, and on the way down, as I say, there was lots of really good fun rapids. There was plenty of times where we stopped and looked at the rapids like we have here in this part of the video, and Steve went through first, I followed him, and this in here, the water was actually quite violent, more so than it appears in the film. In between the rapids, there was often places where the water was deep and quite still, but there was always a little bit of flow. So like here in the vision here we're looking at now, it's quite deep there and a bit of flow there. I'm testing the depth. As we went down, we kept striking places with large logs and large rocks. The large logs had been swept to the side, and later in the trip, one of those large logs was going to get me into a lot of trouble. Here I am coming down through a little bit of flow there, and so this is just to set the scene to see what happened and how it led up to happening. This was pretty scary at the time it happened. So in a moment we'll just jump forward to the area where I'm coming down into this very downhill area next to a log, like the one on my left here, but it'll be on my right hand side and you'll see me coming into it. Okay, so we'll just watch kayak go through this little bit of area here where there's quite a lot of turbulent water, big rocks to avoid, some that are underwater like there. Wang, I ran into that. Steve did better than me. He was able to skillfully manipulate his way around a lot of them. I didn't see them till I was on them, and perhaps I needed to be more observant rather than to try and use my strength, because it was too late a lot of the time before I could react. So leading into the issue that we had, we'll just put the video forward now, and you'll see me coming into a downhill area, which the Huon River is very downhill. It goes from up in the mountains right down to sea level, so even though when you're on it seems flat, you're actually going slowly downhill. But in parts of this section of the Huon River, it's not that slow downhill. It's quite a dramatic drop down. Okay, so I'll just pause this now and we'll look at the incident as it happened. Here I am approaching the log. I've slowed it down a little bit, just the first part of it. Steve's already been through. He hit against the log and used his arm to push himself away. I tried to do that, and it just buckled my arm and sort of squashed me under the curvature of the log. As you can see, the water's getting deeper. I'm still in my kayak, and it's sort of trying to momentarily felt like it was going to try and push me under the log, and I was afraid to perhaps get stuck under there, so I decided to try and climb up on the log, and here I am trying to fight my way out of the kayak, which was, the power of that water was stronger than me by a lot. Here I am up on the log, sort of half kneeling, half standing in the kayak. Steve by now has realised what the hell's happened to me, and he's sort of done a good job to be able to turn around, and he's heading back towards the danger, and I'm sitting there just thinking, how the hell am I going to remove myself from this? So Steve walks out towards me. I'm yelling out to him that I'm unhurt, and I didn't really have any ideas. I said, do you have any ideas? What do I do? And we decided I'd try and give him my paddle, but it was too powerful. The water was too powerful for Steve to reach me, so I did a bit of a throw and threw my paddle towards him, as you'll see in a minute. Here I am attempting to throw my paddle to him. It was a pathetic throw, and the way the paddle goes, and it's being swept down the stream. So now I'm stuck under a log with my kayak underwater and no paddle. 10 kilometres from anywhere near where a phone works. So Steve headed off, got back in his kayak and shot down the river and retrieved my paddle. And meanwhile I'm there sort of fighting, trying to get the kayak out and trying to get it down to where the water level is higher against the log, so the curvature of the log is not able to let the kayak be sucked under it by the power of the water. So the kayak's incredibly heavy. There's my pump. Now I didn't want to lose my pump because we were getting full of water, so we may need to use the pump at some point. So I had the pump in my left hand, and now I'm trying to hang on to the boat in my right hand, and I'm thinking I'll put the pump in my teeth, and that didn't work. I thought, oh my goodness. And I thought, I've got to use both my hands. I'm not good enough to get this out with one hand. So in that moment I decided to just think about things for a little bit. And there it is, powerfully filling the kayak and sinking it again after I'd emptied a bit of it out. And I'm still trying with one hand, fighting a losing battle. I've got to be careful the kayak doesn't get sideways and go against my legs. It would be scary if that happened. So I thought I'll pelt the pump down towards Steve and hope to God he finds it and sees it. He can't hear me. The power of the water, he couldn't hear my voice. I did shout out to him to try and see if he can get my pump as well. And he couldn't hear me because of the roar of the water. Maybe if I put the pump on top of the log, that might have been a smarter way to go. But now I'm starting to win. I'm starting to get the the kayak down along the length of the log where the water is higher on the log. And it's just then dealing with the weight of it. Even though it's still buoyant, it's bloody heavy. And I was sort of sapped of a bit of my strength at that point. I needed to have a rest, but there was no rest for me. I had to get the kayak and get myself out. By then Steve was on his way back with the pump. He'd found that, and he'd also caught up to my paddle just before it got to the next rapids, which would have been goodbye to the paddle if it had gone over, because he wouldn't have been able to get back to me had he have gone over chasing the paddle. So here he is, and see him in the distance there paddling back towards me, towards the danger. And by now I'm putting the kayak up on an angle to try and make less weight in it so that there's less water in it, but it was still damn heavy. There's no way it can move it. And he's now reached the shore, and ice cool, very, very calm, very cool, just making his way towards me, not particularly worried. And of course at that end of the log the danger is the power of the water is less, and he comes out and we get the kayak back to the shore and tip it over and empty it out and then start again. Okay, so what could I have done differently in this situation to avoid being, on top of my kayak with my kayak underwater in this situation against this big log? Well, if we look at the next photo, I'm coming into it. I'm too far over to the right. There's a lip of water falling down towards the log. I needed to keep off that and be further to the left. Steve was ice cool. I think he managed to go over it a little bit as well, but he was able to just push himself away from the log. And it'll be an interesting challenge next time we do this trip down from Southwood Bridge. It was a good day, a great trip, and I recommend it to anyone who's got the kayak to do it. Here we are at the end of our trip, or near the end, with the compulsory selfie. Okay, thanks.